Hi, I'm Max Kaiser. This is the Kaiser Report. We got them just where we want them. Stacey.
Well, Max, this first headline is the theme of the show, okay? It's Allahu Akbar, Allahu Gold Bar. We're all terrorists now. Believe in a return to the gold standard? You are now officially an extremist, according to the FBI.
Yeah, we got them just where we want them. You know, they're trying to keep the gold price cheap because it makes a mockery of the U.S. dollar. So the FBI is saying if you buy gold, you're a terrorist, thus increasing the panic buying of gold around the world. This is just like Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke trying to talk his way into some kind of economic nirvana, which has failed miserably. Now the FBI believes that they're hotsy-totsy economists. They're going to talk gold down. Yeah, right, that's going to happen, you frickin' idiots. You're only going to cause more panic buying. I went out and bought more.
In fact, it's actually worse than what this headline from Zero Hedge suggests. They're saying that if you believe in a return to the gold standard, you're an extremist, according to the FBI. In fact, it's actually if you think that the U.S. government went bankrupt by going off the gold standard, you're an extremist. Now look at the full context, however, of the FBI warning. FBI warns of threat from anti-government extremists. Now, if it weren't for the gold warning, you would think these were bankers. Anti-government extremists opposed to taxes and regulations pose a growing threat to local law enforcement officers in the United States, the FBI warned on Monday. These extremists, sometimes known as sovereign citizens, believe they can live outside any type of government authority, the FBI said. The extremists may refuse to pay taxes, defy government environmental regulations, and believe the United States went bankrupt by going off a gold standard.
Well, I like the way they referred to it in the past. And they say the FBI is saying that the United States went bankrupt when it got off the gold standard. Yes, when the U.S. got off the gold standard and they filled the economy worth of now 15+ trillion in debt, that's true. They went bankrupt. So the FBI is saying, if in fact you pick up a history book, if you look at a fact on the internet, if you speak with a neighbor about the facts of the reality of the bankruptcy of the United States, we're gonna come after you, and we're gonna cause massive global panic buying of gold because that's how smart we are.
The FBI mentions that these so-called sovereign citizens are committing many crimes, mostly white-collar crimes of fraud, they say. Again, if it were not for that one single sentence of gold standard issue, you would not know the difference between who they are talking about and bankers. How many taxes did Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan pay last year, Max?
About 1% of income. General Electric, not zero.
Okay, so these extremists refuse to pay taxes. How many regulations does Jamie Dimon say he wants to abide by?
None. He goes to other countries like Canada and gets them to go around their own regulations.
Exactly. However, we're going to turn to some more extremism, Max. How your dollar got to be worth just 3.8 cents. This is an extremist chart from Credit Suisse Bank on the extremist website businessinsider.com. And you can see from the chart on the red, the rising prices. Notice how prices really started to take off, Max, after 1971. The blue is the purchasing power in $1,900. Now notice the two huge catastrophic drops of about 50% in a 10-year period when your purchasing power dropped by 50%. The first time, 1910 to 1920. What happened in that 10-year period? The Federal Reserve was created. Then the second one, 1970 to 1980. Do you remember what happened in that 10-year period, Max?
Enlighten me.
We went off the gold standard. So this is an extremist chart. You might be arrested for looking at it.
That's correct. As you point out, from 1971, when the U.S. went off the gold standard, to the present, the dollar lost like 97% of its value. It's about, believe it or not, it's about to lose another 60 or 70% of its value. Ben Bernanke himself, in his recent testimony, said by inflation targeting, he wants the U.S. to lose 33% of its purchasing power over the next 5 to 6 years. Okay, so by all the FBI's definition, they should be frog marching Ben Bernanke out of the Federal Reserve into the prison system. But I don't get it. Where's the double standard there? Oh, that's right. You're panic people buying into panic buying of gold. Smart move.
Now, again, we're going to turn to an extremist series of maps here. And you'll find that, in fact, the reason why the FBI is warning, I believe, against people saying the U.S. went bankrupt by going off the gold standard, if you look at these series of charts from 1970 to 1980 to 1990 to 2000, what you notice is that, in fact, in 1970, the U.S. was already bankrupt, and then they went off the gold standard. If you look at the rest of the globe and all of these maps from Zero Hedge, in fact, the rest of the world was pretty solvent while the U.S. was going bankrupt. But what happened once the U.S. and the rest of the world went off the gold standard? The rest of the world became bankrupt.
Yeah, well, because of the toxic derivatives that are floating in all the other banks around the world that are manufactured in the United States because the U.S. is off the gold standard. And as you point out, in the 70s, they were already bankrupt because of the Vietnam War that they couldn't pay for. And I noticed that the FBI hasn't issued a statement saying that unless America gets out of these wars that they can't pay for, it'll continue to be bankrupt. I don't see the CIA or Obama saying that unless America stops these wars around the world that they can't pay for, that the U.S. will continue to be in bankruptcy. So is it those words not in the dictionary down there at the Langley or wherever you're hanging out watching this show and panic buying gold, as I know you are?
Again, let's return to this last chart there, the last map of the external debt to GDP. When it's a gold standard, if the U.S. was in debt, they had a trade deficit. That meant they had to send their gold to France. They had to send gold to Britain, meaning that Britain had a surplus and they were not in debt and they were not bankrupt. However, as you see from this last chart here in the last decade, every single nation on earth is bankrupt. Therefore, where is the wealth going to come from? We are all bankrupt.
Excellent points. And you know, and the use of the language is really phenomenal, like this use of the word sovereign. And if you wish sovereignty, you're a terrorist. I mean, this is exactly what they're telling the people in Greece. The people in Greece would like economic sovereignty. The people in Greece would like sovereignty. But the Troika, the IMF, the ECB, and whatever other fakakta organization they got down there is saying that, no, sovereignty is for chumps. You want to be a debt slave. You want to be a chump like us. Here, take more debt. And the Greek people are like, well, gosh, I'm not sure. Is that really what we should be doing while we're eating our souvlaki?
Speaking of Greece, we have Greece in the headlines, Max. Dramatic drop in budget revenues. Now, this might be an extremist language here too, but Finance Ministry in Greece is reporting that January data shows a revenue decline of 7% against their budget projections of a rise of 8.9%.
It's in free fall like Argentina for the same reason. You had a kleptocrats come in and steal all your money. Now the economy is in free fall and it's going the way of the all flesh into the terminal decline. And the Greek experiment, only 5,000 years old, is finished.
And remember, it's the people who have been for the last few years resisting the IMF and the EU and the Troika. They're the extremists. Worse still, value-added tax receipts posted an 18.7% decrease last month from January. This follows a last year. Here's a headline, Max. Greece increases reduced VAT and austerity measures. So to get the last round of bailouts, they had to increase their VAT from 13% to 23% on food. It's resulted in a catastrophic decline in revenues.
Yeah, the price of moussaka is skyrocketing. Ouzo? Nobody can afford it anymore. They're making bathtub gin. Using old grapes and olives.
Well, the Finance Ministry officials attribute the slump in VAT receipt figures to the major cash flow problems that enterprises are facing. Some of the latter are choosing not to pay for their VAT in order to plug other holes caused by liquidity problems.
Well, the whole thing is a farce because the IMF came in and they said, if you don't take these austerity measures, we're going to have to cut you off from your credit supply and your economy will go into free fall and you'll lose your bond rating. So then the rating agencies came in like Moody's and S&P and said, well, because of the austerity measures that you put into place in your country, we're going to have to cut your credit rating anyway. So the bond market collapsed, the income has collapsed, the GDP has collapsed, the entire sovereignty has collapsed. The use of the word sovereignty is not considered a terrorist act, and the people are out in front of the Parliament building in Syngenta Square.
Well, Max, now plugging these holes is the only thing we have since going off the gold standard. The story about the VAT receipts declining because enterprises are plugging their holes, they're taking any cash they get and filling in their debt holes, their black holes of debt. It sounds like what happened with MF Global, of course.
No, not MF Global. The monster from the deep. We've come from MF Global. Jamie Dimon is a zombie that must be fed from customer money. Segregated accounts, we don't respect them. We just steal the money and give it to Jamie.
Well, here's a headline on MF Global. Tumultuous last days in MF Global collapse. An investigation in the U.S. by the trustee for MF Global has revealed the brokerage misused customer funds 5 days before the New York-based parent company filed for bankruptcy in October. The 3-month investigation into the U.S. parent also shed light on the growing chaos inside MF Global during its final days as customers were pulling funds from the broker that specialized in derivatives and high-risk trading products. Now, who actually went bust? Whose money was stolen? It wasn't people engaged in high-risk trading products. This is the same sort of propaganda that we see in the first headlines. You can act like a banker. You can not pay taxes. You cannot believe in regulation. You could dump all sorts of toxins into the environment. But as long as you don't believe in the gold standard, you're fine. Here, the same thing. These were small farmers, mostly, who had all of their money stolen. But to the population at large, they're saying they were engaged in high-risk trading.
Right, the small farmers who use the futures markets to reduce risk of farming. This is what futures markets are created. But in the last days of MF Global, the speculators like Corzine and Jamie Dimon, who are taking the opposite trade from the farmers and leveraging that by 1,000 times and then putting that risk out into the public domain to be absorbed by the derivatives market that ends up being foisted on countries like Greece anyway. They're the ones who are being victimized. Oh, we're a victim. My bonus.